In this video, we're going to cover these 6 sampling methods. I'm going to show you some visuals that represent them and then cover some definitions that match up with them as well. And as we go through all these sampling methods, it's important to keep in mind that a good sample always represents that population and is selected randomly. The first type of sampling we're going to cover is simple random sampling. So that's comparable to like if you put a bunch of names in a hat. You have your population right here, you throw them all in a hat, and then you just randomly select those. That way every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. As you can see in this picture over here, you've got 1 through 12 and you're just randomly picking 2, 5, 8, and 10, or at least it's supposed to show that. So simple random sampling is exactly what it is. It's just taking every member of the population, putting it in a lottery type system, and then picking randomly. So every member of that population has an equal chance of being selected. Stratified sampling is a sampling method that deals with groups. So what you're going to do is take a whole population and then you separate it into strata. So you have 4 different groups right here. We call them strata, and usually they go off of a type of characteristic. For example, I always say with high schoolers, if you're trying to sample a entire high school, you could break it up into grade levels like freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. So each of these 4 strata right here would be a grade level, and then within each grade level you take a simple random sample. So if you look closely, you've got a couple of these people highlighted, right? Or like little circles under their feet. Those are the 4 random people selected in each one of those strata. And then you have your final sample right there. So stratified sampling, it separates the, again, population into groups based on a characteristic, and then it takes randomly people from every single group. And that would be then your final sample. Cluster sampling is really similar to stratified sampling. It's another one where you divide up the population into groups. So here you have a big population and you circled 6 groups. However, 3 of those 6 groups right there were selected to be a part of the sample right here. So you're going to take the entire cluster, or you could take several clusters too. It's not like stratified where you're taking a few different members of each group. You're going to take the entire group or multiple groups, and that would be your sample. So again, on this right side here is just another illustration. You have 1 through 15, and it looks like they're grouped into 3s, and you're going to take 2 entire groups of 3 to be a part of your sample group, 2 clusters. Systematic sampling is a little different from stratified and cluster. Now you're going to take every member of the population and line them up. In this case, you have 1 through 12, and then you're going to pick at a given interval. So it looks like they're randomly starting with 2, and then they want to pick every 3rd member here. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this way they're picking members at a given interval. And a good way of identifying this sampling type of method is, and anytime you see something where it's like 3rd or 4th or 21st or 100th, that's a dead giveaway whenever you see that nth in that description or whatever you're reading. Self-selection or volunteer sampling, this is when you might come into a situation where you have a little bit of bias. As you can see here, you have a researcher, for example, and you've got 5 people that are going towards that researcher. They are going to that researcher by volunteering to participate in this study. So a good example is, I always tell people, if you have a poll that was put on a website, you have people that volunteer to go to that website and participate in that poll. And the reason why you might get some bias with this is because some people that go to take that poll or participate in it, they might be having strong opinions about that, whatever that topic may be, and they're pulled to participate for some reason. So keep that in mind. Although self-selection, it is a way to get some data, it just might lead to some bias type of data. And then convenience sampling is almost like the opposite. You've got this researcher here, right? But instead of arrows coming towards the researcher is touching the 5 closest people here. So it's just gathering a sample out of convenience, literally. So for example, like if you're standing in front of a store and you sampled the first 50 people that walked into the store, that would be a convenient way of gathering a sample. But again, it leads to bias because you're not giving every member of that population a chance to be picked because you're just grabbing the first ones that you see. So a key word also that I tell people is if you see the word first in the description, a lot of times that might be a convenient sample. So that would be the sixth type of sampling method that we would cover in this video. In time for the recap. Simple random sample was the very first sampling method we cover, and the keyword here was random. Every member of the population has an equal chance of being picked. So this is the ideal situation. Stratified was the first sampling method where we worked with groups, and then we would take a group of people from every one of those strata. Each one of those groups would be represented in the final sample. Cluster was another way of grouping into groups, or we call them clusters, and you would take the entire group or cluster, whereas with stratified, you wouldn't be picking the entire strata or group, you'd just be picking members from each group. Systematic, the key word that you would see is sometimes the nth person or item being selected. You pick them at equal intervals like 4th, 23rd, 50th, and so on. Self-selection or volunteer literally is just volunteering, but you might have some bias with that. People have strong opinions, so they want to volunteer their time so their voice is heard. And then last but not least, convenience, another type of method that leads to some bias because you're just not giving everybody an equal chance of being selected from the population. It's just a quick and easy way to gather a sample and then make some conclusions based on what you have. And if you're trying to identify the sampling method being used in a situation, a lot of times you could look for the word first, because it'll say like the first group of students walking into a school or first group of people walking into a store. So look for that keyword first.